Hey everybody, it's Anthony Brogdon on the one and twos. I'm super excited today. The lady I got on the channel is very well thought of in her community. She's a pillar of her community. So much so, she is a politician on the state's highest level. She is moving and grooving in her community and making things happen. You want to get it done, you call her. And she'll say, yay, yay, if possible, and make it happen. I am super excited that she's on the channel. We jamming here at Strong Inspirations, where we keep it and we give it to you straight, no chaser. This is tremendous to have her on. There's no question about it. She's gonna tell you something that's gonna blow your mind. Watch out. So do me a favor, my friends, hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. It's free. We don't ask no information. Hit the like button on this video because there is no love button, and I know you're going to love it. Hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock. Your kids kiss you. Whoever you want kissing you will kiss you to let you know there is new content on this show. I'm not playing with you. Like I say, my friends, we jamming here, Strong Inspirations. And then tell somebody about it. Don't keep it to yourself. You learning all this good stuff that we have here, and then you won't tell nobody what it is. Share the link. Did you see the one I did? And I'm in her state with the gentleman out of Fort Mose, where they allowed them enslaved folk, to come through there, and they said, hey, you come in here, you help us fight against the enslavers, and it's a done deal. They said, shoot, man, that's a proposition we don't have to say and think twice about. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did out of Mims, Florida? The guy was so tight, he was not scared of them white folks. He was up there setting up them NAACP chapters. He was registering people to vote. And a lot of people told him, man, you got to play it cool. He said, I ain't playing it cool. I own the line. I'm not afraid. Sadly enough, they got to him and blew him up in his house on Christmas Day. Harry T. Moore, have you heard of that video? Watch that one. His house is now a museum. Did you see the one I did talking about the first Black people that came to America? They came through Florida, because Florida was under Spanish rule. Watch that video. There's a ton of them on here. We go Gullah Geechee, we go Black Mexicans, we go Seminole Indians. I'm giving it to you thoroughly, comprehensively, like what this lady is going to do today. A couple more things, everybody. Y'all might know, you should know, you've been watching me, that I'm a filmmaker. I did this documentary on the rise of Black business in America, titled Business in the Black. Somehow I must have slept on the class when they told us that there were slaves who owned businesses. I had never heard that before. And when I found that out, I said, boom, shaka lock, I got to do something with this information and put it in a documentary. It's streaming on Amazon. It's called Business in the Black. I went one step further. I wrote the book on it. It's the #1 Black business history book on the market. Very reasonably priced, because I want you to have it and it not to be sitting in my office. Get you a copy of this. It's 200 facts, again, on slaves who own business. I name names and tell you what they did. I name all the ways slaves gained their freedom, all the HBCUs, over 20 Black newspapers, over 30 Black 30 Black banks, all in my book, and more information. It's very thorough. You can learn all about me, my Twitter handle, A Strong Dream, and so on and so forth, on my website. Go to businessintheblack.net. I'm jamming up here, y'all. I'm in Detroit, everybody, and I got a bunch of stuff. I'm speaking. I'm doing public speaking now. I'm sharing this. And so you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word, which my middle name was Strong. I want to be a stronger guy. Strong inspiration has made me a stronger person. And in my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. She's a strong sister. Come on, man, please. Let's get it on. Thank you so very much for being on the channel.
I am delighted to be with you this morning.
Your name is?
I am Geraldine Thompson, and I'm a member of the Florida Senate. I represent Senate District 15, which is West Orange County. It includes the cities of Winter Garden and Apopka, the Dr. Phillips area, and the urban core of the city, which is where African Americans originally settled when they came here. And so we are mainly suburbs of Orlando.
Okay, I love it. Thank you so much. Just a couple questions on you. Where were you born and raised, may I ask?
I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, but I was raised in Miami, just south of the Dade County area. And I attended segregated schools there. And until I went to college, everybody who was in the school that I attended looked just like me, from the custodian to the principal. And so it was only when I went to college that I was in a classroom with a diverse group of people who were not in my particular ethnic group. So I was born in New Orleans, raised in Miami, went to the University of Miami in Coral Gables and and FSU in Tallahassee, and moved to Orlando in 1974.
Okay. Let's stay on the town in your raising. Did you lived in a Black neighborhood?
Absolutely. A segregated Black neighborhood in Miami called Perrine.
That's the name of it.
That's the name of it, Perrine.
Where did the white people live?
Well, they lived, west was where we were. And so they, for the most part, lived east. And throughout the South, the railroad tracks separated the Black community from the white community. So they lived east of the railroad tracks, and we lived west of the railroad tracks.
Now, your town in Florida in general is a very pretty state. Was their neighborhood better just in terms of the scenery or something like that? How did your neighborhood become Black? Why did they choose that? Was it closer to downtown? What was the dynamic there?
Just as many areas in the United States, people live close to their employers,
right,
but not in the same communities as their employers.
Right.
And so the employers wanted their servants, whatever, they wanted them close, but not close enough to be in the same community.
Yeah. Was there, who was the big employer there?
In Perrine?
Yeah.
For the most part, people worked in agriculture. It was considered the area that provided your table vegetables. So people picked tomatoes and green beans and okra and that kind of thing. And those products were shipped all over the country during the winter. Because of the climate in Florida, you could grow vegetables year round.
Sure. Did you grow up as on a farm or something? Were your family farmers of some sort? Did y'all
my family members were farmers. They originated in Mississippi, and they owned 60 acres of land in Mississippi, and they farmed it, but they also traveled to other areas where crops needed to be gathered. And so they traveled to South Florida and decided to stay there. And they built a homestead in South Florida.
When you say they travel, were they sharecroppers? May I ask that?
Well, no, they owned the land in Mississippi, but they were I guess you would call them migrant farmers. They would go to whatever state, town, city
Yeah,
that
yeah.
needed crops gathered, and they were the people who harvested the crops.
Okay, just a couple more. Do you know where the plantation is in your family?
Plantation, no, I don't,
Yeah,
because my family owned land. As I said, they owned
yeah,
60 acres of land in Mississippi. And so they didn't live on, they lived on their own land.
yeah, yeah,
My mother was one of 15 children.
yeah.
And if you can think about living on a farm, you had to produce your own labor force.
Yeah,
So 15 children provided you an opportunity to have people working in the fields
yeah,
and bringing in the crops. So they were not sharecroppers.
yeah. Um, but then Miss, okay, you got me thinking. If you don't mind asking, how did they buy 60 acres in Mississippi? Because I mean, you're talking about a very racist town holding black people back. Somebody in your family, great grandfather, had the wherewithal to do this. Do you know how they got to that point?
Well, a lot of it had to do with compensation for people who had been enslaved, and people in the
Okay.
South were promised 40 acres of land and a mule as
Yeah.
reparations.
Right.
So some of it was a land grant to attract people to come to that area and to settle in that area.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh man, that's good stuff. In your town in Florida and in New Orleans, do you know of a racial incident that most people don't know about, or anything like that, or something that, like I say, most a story that most people don't know that people should hear of?
Well, in the area where I live now, I
Yeah.
have done a lot of research and I've documented many of the incidents that happened in the Orlando area. Yesterday, I went to Rosewood,
Oh
and
yeah.
Rosewood was a community that was destroyed during a riot in 1923 when a white woman indicated that a black man had
That's right.
accosted her.
Right.
And so the white individuals came into Rosewood and burned the homes and killed as many people as they could find. Some people escaped to areas close by, Gainesville, for example. But we went back to Rosewood yesterday, 100 years after this happened. It happened in 1923, and an African American professor from Florida International University purchased some of the land in Rosewood,
Mm.
cleared the land, and set up a tent. We sat in folding chairs. There was
I
a
love
stage,
it.
yeah, a stage where people spoke and performed. And we were told that we were sitting on blood land, the land where these people lost their lives.
Yeah.
Now, that may sound as if it was a simple thing to do, but when the professor came to begin to clear the land where the ceremony was to be held, he was some neighboring person almost ran him over with a truck. And he turned around when he didn't hit him and tried again. So it was deliberate. And
Oh.
the professor had to get the police for security because it's still very dangerous in Rosewood. But you had hundreds of Black people who were in Rosewood yesterday, sitting and standing and walking on the blood land. Now, as a member of the legislature, what interested me was that for the first time in the history of America, a legislative body made reparations. They made reparations, and it wasn't focused on race, it was focused on property rights. And they had a law firm that volunteered to work with them pro bono and to pursue property rights and reparations for the people who lost their properties. You could document who owned the property through records and deeds. You could document who lost their lives through coroner reports, so that this was factual, that this happened. And the legislature in 1994 made reparations to the descendants and the family members of the town of Rosewood. The professor, as I mentioned, was threatened. There's a historical marker now that is on the land where African Americans once lived and thrived in Rosewood. That historical marker is riddled with bullets. Someone or people have used it as a target. And so the historical marker has been defaced as people have shot it.
Yeah, sure.
So as I sat on the bloodland, I was saddened at the number of people who lost their lives in Rosewood, and I was angry that 100 years later, we're still facing the same kind of racial slurs, the same kind of attacks, the same kind of efforts to make us insignificant. And in the state of Florida, there was a law that was passed in the last session that says that you cannot discuss race or racism in classrooms, and you cannot offer any kind of instruction that might make students feel uncomfortable, which is very subjective.
Yeah,
What
sure.
What makes me uncomfortable may not make you uncomfortable.
That's right.
But
right.
this is the law in the state of Florida. And so 100 years later, we're still fighting the fight to be made visible and to have people know about our contributions. So yes, there was Rosewood and that needs to be part of our curriculum. Young people need to know about it. There's also a town that I represent now in the Florida Senate called Ocoee. And before Rosewood, in 1920, you had a Black man, and this was the center of the citrus industry, oranges and grapefruits and limes, lemons, etc. His name was Julius July Perry. And in 1920, Julius July Perry was 50 years old, and he had never voted. He was, you would call them today, a staffing agent, but he would recruit Black people to gather the citrus crops of white people. You needed a labor force. You'd go to July Perry and say, I need so many people to come and harvest my fruit. So the white community knew July Perry. He was a well-off man. He was the head of the Masonic Lodge in Ocoee. He belonged to the AME Church, upstanding citizen who decided at 50 years old that he was going to vote. And so he went to the polling place and was told that he could not vote because he had not paid his poll tax. He protested that he had paid every tax that he was supposed to pay. And he insisted that he be allowed to vote. Well, he was not allowed to vote. There was a debate, and he left and went home. A mob followed him to his home in the colored quarters of Ocoee, took him out of his home in front of his wife, in front of his children. He told the children to run, to get under the house. They had shot into his home, and July Perry shot back. And two white members from Ocoee were killed. July Perry was taken to the county jail, which is in Orlando. The mob followed him to the jail, took him out, and lynched him. Hung him from a tree because he wanted to vote. He wanted to exercise his rights as an American citizen, a 50-year-old Black man who was killed in 1920 in Ocoee. Well, he lived in Ocoee. He was really hung in Orlando. Now, as I described the area that I represent in Florida Senate as the creator would have it, I now represent the city of Ocoee.
I love it. Oh man, congratulations on that too. That's huge. Now, Florida at one point, Florida's got a unique history. They had areas that they were free areas, and initially, the enslaved ran to Florida for freedom. But then, as time goes on, Florida has more lynchings than any other state in the country.
That is correct. Florida led the nation. It's a shameful fact, but led the nation in terms of the number of lynchings. And that had a lot to do with the economy in the state of Florida. When I talk about Ocoee, what happened to July Perry had to do with maintaining social order, having people stay in their place. And if you decide you're going to vote, you have as much right, you have as much power as the people that you work for. And so they weren't going to tolerate that. And so a lot of the lynchings in Florida had to do with maintaining the economy and the social order in Florida.
Sure.
And people were lynched for, not working, laundering.
Really?
Yes, no trials, no judge, no jury, just, taken and killed.
Wow.
And so the kind of things that you would imagine that would warrant lynching, that wasn't necessarily the case. People could be lynched for if a white woman said that you looked at her,
that's right,
in a way that she objected to, you could be lynched for that.
Let me ask you this, if you may, if I may, was there a governor, like in Alabama, we talk about the different politicians that, and I can't think of his name, but that was so notorious. Was there a governor in Florida that was really just so racist and outward about it that everybody knows or don't know his name?
Well, we had a governor during the 60s who objected to integration of schools. Brown v. Board that said that separate and unequal was unconstitutional and required in 1954 that schools be integrated. Right. Well, Claude Kirk was the governor of the state of Florida during this time. And he said that he'd rather go to prison than to see the schools integrated. And what's really interesting about that is that he'd rather go to prison. Well, the prisons were integrated, but he didn't want the schools to be integrated.
Right.
He didn't want the schools to be integrated. And he dismantled school boards, dismissed the school board members, made himself the superintendent of schools, did everything that he could possibly do to make sure that integration of schools did not happen in the state of Florida.
Is there, let's stay on the schools, is there a case where some students went into the schools and fought against and then needed state trooper protection, like they did in Little Rock? Is there a story like that?
In 1958, there was a Black man from Orlando, as a matter of fact, who wanted to go to law school at the University of Florida, where our tax dollars were sent.
Yeah.
And our tax dollars supported the University of Florida. His name is George Stark. And George Stark wanted to go to law school. Now, he was admitted to law school at the University of Florida in 1958, and he was separated from his classmates by an empty row of seats. So you had a whole row of empty seats, and then you had George Stark. The students at the University of Florida, for the most part, left him alone. One person befriended him, but they made it very difficult for him. He had to be escorted to class by members of the Florida Highway Patrol because they were concerned about his safety. He was told that his name had been brought up during a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan, and that he needed to be very careful. So he's in the law school, obviously unwelcome, shunned by the other students, denigrated by
Yeah,
the
yeah.
teachers, and after almost 2 years, he left.
Oh,
So he did not complete law school.
oh.
Last year, I offered a resolution in the Florida House and the Florida Senate to honor George Stark.
I love it.
He was almost 90 years old, and that resolution passed the House and the Senate. And for his 90th birthday, we presented it to him to
I
thank
love it.
him for his courage, for his tenacity, for what he had done to bring about diversity in higher education in the state of Florida.
I love it. What about this? Has there been protest? Is there a Selma to Montgomery Bridge crossing in Florida or anything like that during the civil rights where Dr. King came through and some good or bad happened that we might not know of?
In Tallahassee, the students at Florida A&M University, which is located in Tallahassee,
right?
The students marched. The students organized a bus boycott, working with a minister there, Reverend C.K. Steele, who had been a classmate at Morehouse of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So they used some of the same methodology, some of the same tactics in Florida, in Tallahassee with the young people, because the young people, a lot of the young people were the ones who marched and who protested and who sat in, right, because they didn't have to go to work the next day. The adults had to go to work. Right. So it was mainly the young people who were on the front lines, but they were arrested and held in jail for a period of time before they were released. And so we did have protests. We did have marches in Florida. And Dr. King came to St. Augustine, Florida. He spent a lot of time there because of segregation, even of the water. You could not go into the Atlantic Ocean if you were African American unless you had a dedicated beach of your own. You could not just go into the water. So Dr. King, yes, they had wade-ins in St. Augustine where Black people would wade into the water, even though it was segregated. And when Dr. King, one summer in 1963, he came to St. Augustine and he wanted to get a meal. He went to a place called the Munson Lodge and ordered a meal. He was never served. And there were people with him who got into the pool at the Munson Lodge. Well, the owner of the Munson Lodge retaliated against the people who were in the pool by pouring acid on them and pouring acid into the pool. Dr. King sent a message to rabbis, and he said that the faith community needed to be involved in this. And the largest number of rabbis ever to be arrested were rabbis who came to St. Augustine, and they were arrested and they were put in jail because they were there as people who are charged to treat their fellow man as they want to be treated. And they came. And it was the largest arrest of rabbis in the history of the country who came to St. Augustine in support of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Dr. King contacted them by sending a letter. And we certainly know about the letter from the Birmingham jail But not a
Yeah.
lot of people know about the letter from the St. Augustine jail that Dr. King sent that brought the rabbis to that city.
Is there some male, female that has really been a staunch activist over the years that we might not know of their name?
Well, I think most people now know of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune.
She's from Florida.
Well, she was born in Maysville, South Carolina, but she spent her life in Florida.
Oh,
She
okay.
came to Daytona Beach, and started a college for formerly enslaved people, and it was called Bethune. Later, she merged her all-girls school with an all-boys school that was run by a man named Cookman, and it became known as Bethune
That's right.
Cookman. Yes,
Yeah.
and in I think it was 2017, the state of Florida, every state gets two individuals who represent the state by having a statue of them placed in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. Florida had been represented for over 100 years by two white males. One, Dr. John Gorey, who invented air conditioning. And we absolutely love Dr. John Gorey, at least I do. And the other person was General Edmund Kirby Smith, who was a member of the Confederate Army, the Confederate States of America. And he was the second representative for Florida. Well, Florida's legislature voted to remove the statue of Edmund Kirby Smith, take it out of Statuary Hall, put it in a museum somewhere, and to be represented. This is the only state to vote through legislative fiat to be represented in Statuary Hall by an African American woman, and that is Dr. Mary
Oh, I
McLeod
love
Bethune.
it.
Now, there's a statue of Rosa Parks in Statuary Hall, but that was commissioned by Congress. But in terms of a state that says we want to be represented in Statuary Hall by a Black person, a Black woman,
Yeah.
Florida voted to have Dr. Mary McLeod
I
Bethune,
love
and
it.
her statue is there today.
Let me ask you this: Flagler, he's in Florida, right? And his big
Yes,
company. What's the story? Because he hired a lot of Black people, I'm sure.
he did.
What was Flagler's deal?
Flagler was a very wealthy man, and he wanted people to come to Florida. And so he came up with this method of transportation where you'd have a car that rolled along on rails, the railroad. And he hired Black people to lay these rails for the railroad. And so the eastern portion of the state of Florida, going all the way to Key West, was the work of Henry Flagler. There was another white man whose first name was Henry. He was Henry Plant. On the western portion of Florida, he was the one who brought the railroads in. And that was primarily for shipping fruit, etc. Flagler was more concerned about recreation and tourism. And in
Okay.
addition to the railroads, he built hotels. Some of the grandest hotels in Florida were built by Henry Flagler.
Oh, okay. And then he had a university. Did he have a school or something?
There is Flagler College in St. Augustine.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I talked about the time that Dr. King spent in St. Augustine, and he was accompanied when he came by Andrew Young. And Andrew Young gave all of his papers to Flagler College in St. Augustine. That's where they
Oh.
are now. If people
Oh.
want to do research and read about what happened in Florida, the involvement of Andrew Young and Dr. King, they go to Flagler College.
Yeah, I got you. Now, Florida being the multicultural state that it is, with the various immigrants from Haiti and Caribbean and so on and so forth, that makes it a melting pot. What's that dynamic? And do they live among Black people in many instances, or they have, again, we stay around ourselves? They live among themselves. What's that about in the history of that?
I call it more of a salad bowl than a melting pot. With a salad bowl, you're still going to have different ingredients, but it's not going to melt into,
Yeah,
one thing.
yeah,
So it's kind of a mosaic. And a lot of the Haitians who came to Florida settled in the Miami area. And there's an area in Miami that's called Little Haiti.
right, right,
And then there is an area they call it Little Havana, where a lot of the people who came from Cuba settled. So they live next to each other, but not with each other.
right.
They have their own culture, their own customs, etc. It is diverse, but there's not a whole lot of intermarriage, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so you still have some very separate, very distinct groups of people. And in the area that I represent, after Hurricane Maria did a great deal of damage in Puerto Rico, a lot of the people from Puerto Rico moved into the area that I represent. So I
Okay.
have to be concerned about making sure that they get the services and the support that they need in my district. But also, I went to Puerto Rico about 4 months ago, um, to see what was going on there. Many of them are still without power. The power has not been restored. There's a lot of lawlessness, not a strong police force. And we went from small areas like a town called Ponce to San Juan, which is a very metropolitan, vibrant community, but still a lot of challenges. And that is a territory of the United States. And so the United States has a responsibility.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I think President Joe Biden, when the infrastructure bill was passed, he made sure under his administration that there were dollars that were set aside and allocated for Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I have constituents in Florida, but their families they didn't want to leave.
Yeah,
They're
right,
still
right.
there.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a different dynamic between the different cultures, and maybe even for yourself, how you relate to them? Like, is people from Puerto Rico different, people from Haiti different than Black people in America because they had a different experience in terms of the history? Do you see that being the case,
I
and
do.
so
I
on and
do
so forth?
see that. I do see that. And I see people from the Caribbean whose skin, is black, but they come here with a different attitude, a different expectation, because they were in the majority when they were in the Caribbean. Let's say they were
Okay.
in Jamaica. They were
Okay.
in the majority. So they
Yeah.
never had the kind of challenges that we had in terms of facing fire hoses and
Yeah.
dogs
Right.
and
Right.
sit-ins.
Right.
And they come and they expect to be part of everything. And for a lot of them, that becomes their reality. They are a part. Where we don't have, if we're native born Americans, we may not have that same expectation.
Yeah. Sure.
And I find that the people from Puerto Rico have issues with the people from Cuba. The people from Cuba
Oh,
have
really?
an elitist attitude. Most of them who came were educators. They were children of professionals, physicians, teachers, etc. Whereas some of those from Puerto Rico were more laborers. So there's some friction even within the same kind of ethnic groups.
Yeah, yeah. Florida, being some parts of it, and I don't mean no disrespect when I say this. Let's say I'm a big city guy here in Detroit. We grew up with Black Power. Florida maybe didn't have a Black Power type thing, so you got Black people there who can be subservient to white people. Is that something dynamic that happens in those rural towns that you, as a politician that cover those, have to try to uplift the mindset, first of all, that we've come a long way? Can they realize how far we've come?
Well, there are people who don't want to upset the people in power. They don't want to go against the grain. They don't want any kind of, and Dr. King found this when he came to Florida and some other states, that, people were saying, well, we're getting along okay, we're fine, long as we stay in our area, we don't have any problem. And you're coming to disrupt that. So you do have people who don't want to,
sure.
So there are people who will go along to get along.
Yeah. What is the dynamic of being a politician? First of all, let me go back a little bit further. What made you decide to do this? Were you always very active and an activist in high school and that kind of thing?
I was always an activist, but I had never imagined that I would hold office. That was not something that women did, and it certainly was not something that Black women did. What sparked my interest, I grew up in Miami, and I met a woman, Gwendolyn Sawyer Cherry, who was a teacher, and she was admitted to the law school at the University of Miami. And she decided that after law school, and she transferred from the University of Miami Law School to the law school, which was separate, Black, separate, unequal, at Florida A&M University. She graduated from the law school at Florida A&M University. And she decided that she would leave teaching and become a politician. And she was elected to the Florida legislature in 1970.
Oh,
1970, yes.
Okay.
First Black woman ever to serve in the Florida legislature. And she needed a staff to go with her. And as I said, I was at the University of Miami. She was there. She was older. But I worked for a law school professor at the University of Miami who recommended that to Gwen Cherry, that she take me with her to Tallahassee. And I went to Tallahassee with her in 1970, and I watched her work and I saw how she was able to change things. And so my history is that I worked as secretary to the very first African-American woman ever elected to the Florida legislature, Gwendolyn Cherry. She was pulled in so many directions. She had a family. She was involved in the bar association, involved in the community. And I decided that that was not something that I would ever want to do. It was just too much.
Okay.
And because she was the only Black woman, she was everybody's representative. Okay. Every Black person in Florida, if they needed something, they called her.
Okay.
So I said, no, I wouldn't ever want to do that job. That's just too much.
Right.
And it was 39 years later that I decided that, you know what, my children they're grown, they're in college. I think I'm gonna run for office. Okay. And I did. And I was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2006. And I served in the House from 2006 till 2012. No, and then I ran for the Florida Senate in 2012 and served there until 2016. And just decided that I wanted to do some other things. So I
Yeah, sure.
traveled. I
Sure.
traveled. And one of the places that I went was South Africa. My husband
Okay.
and I traveled there, and we visited a lot of places, including Robben Island,
Yeah.
where Nelson Mandela was
Yeah.
incarcerated for decades.
Sure.
And I stood in front of the cell where Nelson Mandela, this was his cell, and
Yeah.
I held onto the bars and I looked in at the cot, at the bucket. That was all that he had. And he made a lifelong commitment to social change, to social justice. And when I came back home, I said, there's no way that you can just sit on the sidelines.
I love it.
And so I went back, and I'm now in the Florida Senate for the second time.
I love it. Let me ask you this. We jamming. Everybody. Yo, I got an icon on my channel. Check it out. Let me ask you this. If you were back in the civil rights days, how does this feel compared to that? I mean, it's a different dynamic. It's not as harsh, maybe. But if you were back then, or you were trying to fight for people's rights, could you give your life for this? You know what I mean? Because some people got to make that call to say, I'm not scared. You don't have to have that now, but could you have made that call, maybe?
Well, I always challenged what I considered to be unjust laws. And it would terrify members of my family if we were traveling.
Oh, really?
And we would stop, let's say at a gas station is what they were called then. And there was only one bathroom that says whites. I'd go in the bathroom. And my mother
Really?
would be just frantic. She said, something's going to happen to you if you keep doing this. But I always challenged these laws. And now I still challenge. I still challenge the laws when I feel that they are unjust and when they are not supportive of
Yeah.
progress of my people. In my Senate office, I have a beautiful crystal vase, and the vase is filled with stems and reeds and all kinds of things and stalks of cotton. The whole stalk must be 10 or 12 stalks of cotton
I love it.
in this crystal vase.
Yes.
And when I go into my office and I see the cotton, I know my responsibility to my ancestors who bore the burden in the heat of the day, who withstood the lash, who decided that they would survive, and who sacrificed so that I could now sit at the table where the laws are made. And that keeps me grounded.
I love it.
It lets me know what my responsibility is and the debt that I owe, not just to my ancestors, but to other people who didn't pay them when they should have been paid, who
Yeah.
took,
Yeah.
advantage of them. So there's a price to be paid by a lot of people. And I know that when I look at the cotton.
Have you cried doing something that really went well or something like that?
I have cried, but I never do it publicly.
I got you.
I know you've seen the commercial, never let them see you sweat.
Yeah.
and so I have cried. One of the things that I cried about, we had a bill that was moving through the Florida legislature that focused on the history of the Holocaust and making sure that the history of the Holocaust was taught in Florida schools, and indicating that survivors of the Holocaust should be brought into classrooms, just very prescriptive in terms of how you teach the history of the Holocaust. It was moving. And there was a bill that would require the teaching of about the history of the massacre in Ocoee that had not even been heard in a single committee. It was going nowhere.
Oh my
And
God.
so I had an amendment, and I went to the sponsor of the Holocaust bill, and I said that this is related to education, just as your bill is related to education. It's making sure that people know the facts, and I'd like you to consider my amendment. And he agreed. He agreed
Oh my
to
God.
have my amendment placed in his bill. And so now it is law in the state of Florida, just as you have this bill on the Holocaust. A part of that is teaching the history of the massacre that occurred in Ocoee in 1920.
Oh, is that massacre called just the Ocoee massacre or
It
something? Is there a
is.
name? That's what it's
It
called.
is. That's what it's called.
Do you have a motto you live by? A Bible verse that you live by?
Well, one of the things that I believe, and that is that we can't ever win unless we stay in the fight. And so I'm committed to staying in the fight for as long as it takes, as long as I'm here and able to stay in the fight. We can't ever win unless we stay in the fight. And I have fought a lot of battles, sometimes by myself. When we had a person appointed to the Florida Supreme Court who had not even been a lawyer for 10 years, who described herself as Jamaican and not Black, I challenged it because she was not eligible under the Florida Constitution. Members of the Black Caucus said, well, at least she's Black, so we should support her. There were 7 other highly qualified Black people, judges, lawyers, who I thought would have been better. And I brought a lawsuit against the governor of the state of Florida. I filed the lawsuit in the Florida Supreme Court, and I won.
Wow. You're making your mark on that state.
Well, I'm staying in the fight.
Wow. Let me see here. Do you proud of yourself?
Well, I think I've made a difference. I say to my children, I have 3 children, and I want them to understand that making a dollar is one thing, and making a difference is more important.
Okay.
So
Did
I've
somebody
said,
tell you this when you were a teenager or something like, was this burning in you and it just exploded at some point? Did you have an experience as a young kid that you can relate to now that says, okay, I did what God made me, brought me this way? Was there something even back in them days that kind of did this to you?
remember that my mother was one of 15 children, and they lived on this land in Mississippi. There were 8 girls and 7 boys. Most of the boys had to work in the fields. They were not allowed to go to school. So I had uncles who could not read or write.
Oh my God.
And they would get mail and bring it to me because my mother was a teacher. She'd gone to school, and I was her first pupil. And everything she learned, she practiced on me. And before I went to school or sat in anybody's classroom, I could read and write and calculate.
Yes.
So my family saw me as a resource. And when they would get mail, they would bring it to me and have me read it, have me explain it to them. I would draft a reply if it needed a reply. Yeah. So I've been representing people all my life, but I never knew that that's what it was called.
Yeah, sure.
But if you need someone to speak up for you, if you need somebody to explain how the system works and what the process is, I was that little girl. Yeah. My mother was the oldest of these 15 children. So, that and they lived in what was called quarters. There were 4 houses, and everybody lived in the quarters together, in a kind of a compound, if you want to think about it as
Yeah,
like the Kennedy compound. So
yeah,
we lived in the compound, and I did homework for some of my relatives who hadn't quite grasped
yeah,
things,
yeah,
and I was the go-to person.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I'm doing now what I
yeah.
have always
I
done,
love it.
but I'm doing it with a title.
If as we come to a close, did your mother get a chance to see you grow up? Is she still alive, or you know what I'm saying? Did she get a chance to see you graduate from college, that kind of thing?
Yes, my mother was born in 1921. She is no longer alive, but
Yeah,
she saw me go to college. She saw me graduate from college. She saw me get married, but she did not live to see me become a member of the Florida legislature.
yeah. But her spirit lives on, and she's watching
Oh,
you now,
no doubt.
no
She
doubt.
she poured so much into me that's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
there, that has stood me in good stead.
Last question. Is there a question that I have not asked you? Something that you wanted to share? Like, how do people follow you? Do you have a benefit that people can donate to? I don't know. Just how can we help you across America?
I am the founder of a museum of African American history in Orlando, in the inner city. And it was built by one of the first Black physicians who came to Orlando. His name was William Monroe Wells.
Okay.
He was a graduate of Meharry Medical College. He came to Orlando in 1917 and built a home. And he also built a performance hall called the South Street Casino. And the big bands, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, all of those people performed at the South Street Casino. When they finished entertaining, they didn't have any place to stay. So Dr. William Monroe Wells got a building permit to build a hotel. And the hotel, he got the building permit in 1926. And it took him 3 years to get the hotel built because he couldn't get loans from white-owned banks due to redlining. And he opened his hotel in 1929. He named it for himself. It was the Wells Built Hotel, listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book.
Yeah.
So people who travel knew that if you need a place to stay,
Yeah.
you go to Wells Built. Thurgood Marshall, Jackie Robinson, all of the entertainers lived at the Wells Built. I'm the founder. It is now the Wells Built Museum of African American History and Culture. I want everybody to visit,
Yeah.
go
There you go.
online to the Wells Built, and check us out.
There you go. What's the website? Do you know the website offhand? The museum.
It is I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Yeah.
I think it's wellsbuilt.com.
Okay. And Wells is Wells.
Yes, WELLS apostrophe BUILT, Wells Built.
Okay. I'll
And
put it in the description. Yeah, I'll put it in there because we want to support that cause and so on and so forth. Thank you.
well,
Thank
I'm
you.
delighted to have had this opportunity to share my work here in Florida, my goals, and just be confident that I am staying in the fight.
There you go. I love it. Thank you once again, everybody. Strong inspirations where I let the people do the talking. I am blessed to find this lady. Let me say this, y'all. Now, there are people out there who are on a national level, who we hear of them nationally. There are people on a state level that we might not hear them because we don't live in that state, but they are extremely effective. They are extremely committed to the cause. And this is one of them who is giving of herself and was ordained to do this. I assume I'm taking liberties. And she has picked up the mantle. And then life sent her to Africa, and she touched the bars of a cell that said it was like a lightning, wasn't it? Was it like a lightning or something that came on you and it just engulfed you? And you said, when I go back, I got work to do.
Yeah, you don't have the right to sit on the sidelines.
Dang, unbelievable. And that, you know what, who that was? That was God touching her again. You got more work to do, sister, and you the right person. So everybody, thank you for watching us, and you, sister, thank you for being on. Everybody go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Go to her website for that museum. The museum is in Orlando, right? Isn't that where
it is in Orlando, just west of the railroad tracks.
Just west of the railroad tracks. Everybody in Orlando, you haven't gone, go. People in the area, go. I'm coming because I got to come down there very soon. And I like Orlando. Orlando, a beautiful town. I want to come to that Okor too.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to come check that out. There's probably historical markers there. And so to you, my sister, I say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I mean this. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. It's keeping you healthy.
Thank you.
Because you wake up with something to do.
Yeah, it keeps me energized.
It keeps you energized.
Yes.
And you fighting that fight for strangers.
Yeah.
Some don't appreciate it. But you
I was very disappointed this last election that our people, Black people, did not turn out to vote. And you think about how hard you work and how little people recognize what a challenge this is.
Yeah, sure.
And that it takes all of us to really make a difference.
Sure. But you keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Because you touch somebody. Ain't no question. And it's a lot of people, and they might not even say nothing. But you know it's got it, because you're on the side of right. With that, I'll say bye-bye, we out. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Uh-huh.
Bye-bye.